Welcome to our exploration of Chapter 7 of Ethics Matters, The Faces of Consequentialism, Ethical Egoism, and Utilitarianism. This is your Professor Joe. In this lecture, we delve into two influential but distinct moral theories that fall under the broader umbrella of consequentialism, a view that evaluates the morality of actions based on their outcomes. Let's begin with ethical egoism. Imagine facing a decision where you must choose between helping someone else or doing something that clearly benefits you. Ethical egoism argues that you ought to choose the option that benefits you the most. It claims that the morally right action is the one that advances your own self-interest. This doesn't mean you can never help others, but only if doing so also helps you. Thinkers like Thomas Hobbes believed that humans are naturally self-interested. Left unchecked, this would lead to chaos, hence the need for a social contract. On the other hand, Ayn Rand took this idea and turned it into a philosophy of empowerment. She argued that living for your own sake, with rationality and integrity, is not only acceptable but morally necessary. Ethical egoism thus highlights self-care, ambition, and autonomy as central to moral living. However, critics raise several concerns. If everyone acts solely out of self-interest, what happens to community, compassion, or justice? Can a society flourish if people help only when it benefits them? And what about the ethical obligation we feel toward the vulnerable? Now contrast this with utilitarianism, which takes the opposite approach. Instead of focusing on the self, it asks us to consider everyone affected by our actions. Utilitarianism, championed by Jeremy Bentham and later refined by John Stuart Mill, teaches that an action is right if it produces the greatest happiness for the greatest number. Bentham focused on measuring pleasure and pain through his famous hedonic calculus. Mill emphasized the quality of pleasures, not just quantity, arguing that intellectual and moral pleasures are higher than mere physical ones. Utilitarianism has guided public health law and economics with its clear focus on outcomes, but it also faces critiques. Can it justify harming one if it benefits many? How do we measure happiness fairly? Does it ignore individual rights in favor of the majority? These two moral theories, ethical egoism and utilitarianism, offer starkly different views on what makes actions right or wrong. One centers on self-interest, the other on collective welfare. Both invite us to examine the role of consequences in moral decision-making, and both challenge us to think deeply about the kind of life and society we want to build. As we wrap up, remember this: consequentialism in all its forms asks us to look forward, to consider what happens because of our actions. Whether focused on the self or the many, it's a lens that encourages accountability, strategy, and reflection. So ask yourself, not just what feels right, but also, what will this lead to for me and for others? Thank you for joining me in this exploration. Until next time for the next episode.